So just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, I'm excited, to hopefully bring some value to everyone and just, kind of let you know what's going on. And at least from our standpoint at Design Blends and from, Pritzker Law Group, what we're seeing out there and what we're hearing from clients and what we're hearing from the city. So we've prepared kind of a list of things to run through, but also, hopefully, there's a live chat here. And if you all want to, put in there, any questions, concerns, things you want to, know a little bit more about, and hopefully we can, have the answer for you. I know this is an unknown time, but, we're all kind of taking this day by day and working through it, and, things are changing almost hour by hour. But without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first question I have, just to kind of chat, roundtable style, is for Scott. Scott, I just want to know, simple question, or what's going on with the permitting status in Philadelphia right now? Are permits still happening?
A great question, and it's something that we've gotten a lot over the last couple of weeks, and honestly has been moving initially day by day. At this point, week by week, I think it's been changing for the most part. The good thing, which I think a lot of people know, was Eclipse, which is the digital permitting service, was just released before the shutdown happened. Initially, they were only going to do easy permits and trade licenses through that system. They have since revised it so that all zoning and building permits can be run through the Eclipse digital system. The only thing that you have to do is register with the city, which takes a little bit of a process, I'll say, to get registered. But zoning and building permits are able to go in and are being processed. There's a few things to remember with that. The first thing is they have said that review times are going to be lengthened. So they're saying an additional 5 days on top of the permitting should be expected from the regular review times, as well as accelerated review times are not happening at this point. So any review that goes in within the Eclipse system will be a standard review time plus a little bit of extra time, basically, at this point.
So don't pay that extra money.
Do not pay the extra money.
Because you're not going to get a quicker review.
Absolutely. I've heard some rumblings that acceleration is going to come back within the next couple weeks. From what I've heard, though, the fees are going to increase by about double to triple. So it's going to get expensive to accelerate, and probably not worth it at that rate. But who knows on the size of the project?
Scott, is that because they want to have people hold off on that accelerating and not have to give themselves, the city, a timetable? Are they struggling to get through that? Is that why they're kind of pushing that?
That would be my thought. Is that's the reasoning? Either that or they want more money. That could be it too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's more of from that standpoint. It seems like they've been, over the past year or so, all fees have been going up no matter what in permitting.
Can you talk a little bit about permits that were in the works before, that are not new submissions, but were in the works before, or that are being asked for, let's say street stamps or things like that, how you guys are handling that?
Yeah, so anything that went in regularly before the shutdown happened basically is at a standstill. It's still down in the municipal services building. No one really has access to it. They did say nothing will be abandoned, so no applications that were submitted will be abandoned, so you'll keep them. But basically, they're on a standstill until people get back in there. You are able to abandon those applications and resubmit digitally if you want to do that.
I can just say, like, on our end, what we've been doing, and let me know your thoughts on this too, is that we've been at least reaching out to the plans examiners and saying, like, and trying to submit some stuff electronically if they'll allow it, or at least saying, hey, can we get our refusal, things of that nature, so that we have things lined up, just trying to reach out to the plans examiners. And some of them, for us at least, have been responsive, even just to say, like, hey, this is going to take a minute, but like, we're on it. Have you been experiencing that as well?
Yeah, the plans examiners are still working. So, I mean, they're still accessible via email. Again, it's just extended wait times, and depending on what you are doing, depends on the response you're going to get. The other, I guess, oddity from what's typical and from a permitting standpoint is that any additional information that was requested pre-shutdown or even after, I guess, theoretically, can still actually be submitted. There is an address that additional information can be submitted via mail. So if you can access it, print it, you can ship it down to LNI and get it in the queue for them to actually review, which is somewhat helpful.
Yep. Awesome. All right, well, let's keep moving on. If anyone has any questions just on permitting, just throw your question in the chat, either on Facebook or in Zoom here, and then we'll come back to it at the end. One of the other questions we've been getting a lot of is, and Rach, I think this is going to be for you, am I able to resolve LNI, violations right now? If not, what can I do in the meantime?
So I guess the best way to answer it is just, it depends. We are still able to get in contact with some of the LNI inspectors. It just depends on what the issue is. And we've also come up with some workarounds in the event that we can't immediately resolve it. So LNI is kind of operating on like a 10% skeleton staff right now, but I've been able to, through some contacts of mine at City Council, be able to at least get contact information from the certain examiners or inspectors so that I can send them an email if there's a violation. Hey, we're aware of this violation. We're happy to remedy it as soon as possible. One, to let you know that we're aware of it. Here's our information. Please let us know, when it makes sense or when appropriate for us to work through this. And for ones who we can't remedy, basically what we're doing is creating specialty agreements. I know Adam will go into that, but some specialty agreements so that people can put money aside in escrow if there's a pending violation for, let's say, a water meter or for a fence or whatever, so that at least the transactions can continue and close, and then we'll deal with them when we're able to. But there's a couple clients right now that I'm working through alternative avenues to get things resolved. And again, it just depends on what the issue really is.
Cool. Just diving into construction a little bit right now. Adam, I'm going to ask you this one. What's going on? What if I'm having an issue with a contractor GC, either from a developer standpoint or a subcontractor standpoint? What are you seeing on your end relating to subcontractor contractors?
Well, yeah. So, obviously, that there's only certain people right now who have the waivers or who are allowed to actually be working. That being said, issues haven't stopped, right? Or issues that, occurred in March, early March, haven't stopped, and likely haven't been resolved. So I know from our experience with what we're submitting through either a court of common pleas or in the event that we're doing something smaller at the municipal level, you can still file. What happens after the initial filing, probably nothing, but at least the thought is that you get it in the pipeline, because you can only imagine that there's going to be a pecking order of how the courts are going to start looking at this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's going to go from, hope the people that filed first all the way to the people that, okay, when the courts open back up are filing, and you can just imagine the logjam. So this is the best time right now to prepare to get your cases ready. And while you can't, pursue to the length probably of like a normal schedule, obviously, you can start to get things ready just like you would in both our fields and in a lot of other ways.
Great. And I'm gonna add on to that a little bit, touching on the construction waiver side. I'm just gonna share my screen here. So right now we have about 12 active job sites going on around the city of Philadelphia. And unfortunately, the word active is not the right word to use at the moment. All of them are shut down, but we did file waivers on a good portion of them, just for ones that, based on the reference of what it is. I'm just going to pull up here. This is what we got in the mail 2 days ago to us. Pretty much, I'm not sure if you guys can see it as well as I can, but essentially it's a standard. We've seen other developers in the city get this letter, but it seems very standard. It doesn't, we've asked for permission to continue on job sites that need roofs, job sites that we want to make safe. But this is the response that we got from Governor Wolf and Rachael Levine, Secretary of Health. But it's very vague. And from a legal standpoint, Adam, what would you think around this? It says projects that are substantially completed are those that have been issued a final occupancy permit. Like, what are your thoughts on continuing construction relating to a letter like this?
It's a great question. I'd follow up with Rachel too on it, but I'd say, it's obviously a best judgment as a professional, right? So, being sure that the imperative is that we're staying safe, like the main order is that everybody's staying safe, being safe so that we can effectively shut down the spread of this virus and we can get back to regular work schedules. So, I think that's really the design professional reading that in the most conservative sense. I think, I think they're getting stuff out just like they did with the payroll protection program to the banks. They're getting stuff out, having not been able to, and not their fault, but not being able to fully vet out what it actually means and what they're actually requiring and who they're actually allowing to do work. So, I think it's up to best judgment. I would say just be conservative because, just like what happened in 2008 with when they were doing funding for the banks and the banks ended up pushing the stuff out as quick as possible, only to have the federal government come in and sue them later for tens of millions of dollars. It's being conservative and keeping your best judgment. And you know what, there is going to be some risk to it, but you do the best you can really. And you know which ones are the ones that you really do need to make safe and ones that are substantially completed that only need some touch, because it is important to get people into the homes. People do need homes. Rachel was just speaking recently and talking about an example where a doctor is coming in to help with some of the healthcare issues and he needs a place to stay. So, that being said, living in residential building is still, viable and crucial element that needs, resolutions and need to be completed.
Yeah, and Adam, to that point, within the letter, which I'm sure we can share piece of that on the Facebook page, Brian, but it does say, you're able to do construction and specifically things that are needed to prevent material and construction damage. So, for instance, we have some exposed projects that don't have roofs and windows in them currently at the moment. If left, obviously in that state, it's going to degrade the plywood and the sheathing inside. So I think, again, using judgment and those kind of characteristics to your best knowledge is something that needs to be done. Could we do the siding on that house as well? We have a zip system. It's good for 6 months. Probably don't need to do it. Just kind of using judgment in those sense that again, like to Adam's point, could be defendable, at a later time if it needs to get to that.
And there's also obviously the warning that the state put out, and Philly put out regarding, if you are applying for funding business-wise, that there could be liability where you might not get that funding or, there might be revoked the forgiveness of it that they're talking about.
Yeah, you don't want to be one of those bad actors. I think that sometimes people try and just, to Adam's point, you want to be conservative about it. And I think judgment could be a loose term depending on who you're talking, to, but and sometimes, there will be some bad actors who will ruin it for everyone. And, you also have to consider, like, there may be some people, subs and contractors who just aren't comfortable going on the site, and you have to respect that. So I think, you have to take it case by case, but keep in mind that nobody's trying to penalize anybody right now. We're just trying to Adam's point, stay safe so that we can move past this virus.
Great. I want to hop back over to a little permitting question. Scott, another one, multiple people asking. Subdivision, what's going on? Is it possible? Talk to me about the process if I need to subdivide and get that going right now.
Subdivision's big, and it affects a lot of projects that are happening. And we've been in constant contact with the multiple civil engineering companies on kind of where this stands, who've been talking to the survey districts. Unfortunately, the survey districts are completely shut down at this point. I do not have a clear picture of when they're coming back online or what capacity they can eventually work with, but that basically halts every single consolidation or subdivision in the city, kind of with where it's at and really anything that can be submitted to this point. Civil engineers also are shut down currently at this state. So like we haven't found any civil engineers that are going out. Initially, there were some going out on sites for the first week or two. Pretty much all of them have been kind of told to not go out. Kind of along those lines, geotechnical engineering and site soil testing there's minimal companies, I think, that are going out. I know about one or two that are still going out on site. And we've been told that to tread lightly when this does come back online, because there could be some price jumps depending on timelines and kind of when people need to get stuff back in there, just based on volume. You know, I think before this all happened, you know, things were busy as is, with you know, 2 months shutdown and a backlog. There's probably going to be a few consultants that, you know, don't have the manpower initially to gear up. So, you know, it's key to try and line up as much as possible, I think, during this time.
Yeah, I've heard from multiple subcontractors, other GCs, you know, people have laid off full swatches of employees. You know, our plumber specifically, you know, he told me that he furloughed his whole team. You know, he's got 30 people on staff. You know, so I also, you know, keep in mind there is going to be a ramp up period. You know, internally we're predicting, you know, 30 to 60 days before, you know, once construction can begin again, great. You know, how long is it going to take to get a plumber out there to do your roughing? You know, it's just things like that, you know, and it's affecting all of the, you know, consultant trades from architecture through construction at the moment.
I'd also add just that there are some other opportunities instead of a subdivision. For example, we've been doing a couple of condo docs as an alternative on some properties where it makes sense. Not every property it makes sense. Obviously, a subdivision is a cleaner way to do it for the most part, but there are some instances where you can do condo docs instead. You still need you know, documents from a civil engineer. They don't have to be approved by the survey district, but eventually in order to actually finalize them, the civil will have to go to the site depending. But what we've been able to do in one case in particular was the civil engineer was able to gather enough information from city records and things so that at least start the process. Now it won't get finalized until they're able to then go on site, but at least, you know, to Scott and everyone's point, we're going to have everything lined up. So all that they have to do is finalize the plans, and then, you know, we can deal with OPA and eventually get it reported. So, you know, there are some workarounds. I wouldn't try and push that on every single thing, but, you know, there are people still working and coming up with some creative solutions so that we can move forward.
Rich, speaking on that, give me an update. You know, obviously with your connection to City Council, you know, and you're constantly at ZBA weekly. What's going on with City Council, ZBA, planning, RCO meetings? Are they stopped? Are they happening? What's going on?
Sure. So City Council actually did their first virtual council hearing, committee hearing to appropriate $85 million for COVID-19 relief, to put money towards the small business relief fund that is being run through PIDC, and to appropriate additional money for relief and city services given what's going on. I do believe they're going to continue that. I think the next one is the 16th, if that's the Thursday. We were lucky enough to get an update yesterday from Derek Green. I know, Brian, you were on the BIA's call, and so he was kind of sharing some information. As far as the ZBA is concerned, it's shut down until further notice. They sent out an email recently saying that they extended the deadline indefinitely at this point for appeal applications, any of their hearings. Obviously, all the April hearings are canceled. I'm sure they will cancel May if it continues like this. And I've just been hearing from people that maybe when they come back, they'll try and, you know, the board has 6 members generally. They'll try and split them 3 and 3. The legislation states you have to have at least 3 votes in the affirmative for a variance to get approved. And so what they'll maybe do is split it 3 and 3 and have on Wednesdays double sessions at the same time to get as many people through as possible. That's not been written in stone now, but they're looking at things. I don't know if they're going to try and process appeals online. As far as RCOs are concerned, you know, I know that there's been a couple of RCOs, like Sosna I was hearing about, that did do a virtual RCO meeting to help move things along, but that's not a uniform thing right now. And as you may, you know, guess, like, depending on the neighborhood group, some people have better or less access to technology, and you know, there are laws around notice and sending letters out and all sorts of things. So I think they're trying to just make sure that we don't run into any legal issues down the road with cases. And so as of right now, if you can get a group or they're able to do that, that's great, but that's not generally what most groups are doing. So.
And Rachel, what about like on, I think maybe you and Scott were on a specific case. Have you guys been able to get in touch with specific council people to discuss anything like that?
Yes, that's a good reminder. So yeah, we had a call last week, I want to say, with Councilwoman Bass, where there's two different projects, one of which I'm working on with Design Blends. We're doing a bunch of single family homes where we're doing a subdivision, and then there's a ton of city owned land next to it. So we were talking with the councilwoman about what the opportunity would look like to acquire that from the land bank. And then in addition, I had another project in her district that we're working on to talk through some legislative relief given the zoning classification of the property. And we were just having preliminary conversations, but Councilwoman Bass was kind enough to have that conversation with us. There's another project we're working on in another district where I'm hoping to get, on a virtual call with the chief of staff just to have preliminary conversations, nothing really set in stone, obviously, because you do need community buy-in and everything. But there are council offices and staffers who have been, really responsive. I did working on a land bank acquisition project in the 3rd councilmanic district with Councilman Gauthier, and we were able to go back and forth with her staff on another issue that we had. So the answer is yes, if you ask. And, we've been trying to at least try and move the ball forward as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think, the ask necessarily, again, when we weren't in the shutdown, it was hard to ask and to actually get that, which I think is something different and more of an opportunity from where we're at today.
Sure. Yeah.
It was like, oh, well, good luck.
So to ask the big question, and probably the number one asked question so far that we've been fielding, the 10-year tax abatement. Touchy subject for current projects in motion, upcoming projects. Rachel, start with you. What are you hearing on it? Will they extend it? That's the big question. Yeah,
the BIA has been kind of the best source for this discussion because they have a lobbyist who constantly interfaces with council on issues like this. I think what they've been saying, and that I could certainly understand, is that, with the budget, so the city starts their budget hearings in March after the mayor delivers his budget address, usually the first week in March, and goes all the way. This was to vote on it and approve it before July 1st. And the budget's going to look a lot different now than we thought it was going to look, given the amount of money that's being extended. Again, I said $85 million. If you look at what the state expended, the state, right? We're a city, the state, only $50 million. So,
and they probably need more.
Oh, they
definitely need more.
Of course they do. If our
said they were expecting $10 million worth to go out on the PIDC. And I think $10 million came in the first hour request.
Yeah, over $60 million worth of applications came in. I think the city had only allotted $11 million. They finally, got more money, but $11 million. So as far as the abatement is concerned, I think when they initially revised the legislation, it was because there was so much pushback from neighborhood groups and other people about the way that it was affecting the tax basis in the city, and that, a lot of advocates for the school district were wanting additional revenue. A lot of people may know that 55% of the property tax goes to the schools and 45% goes to the city. So with the tax abatement, although it generates a lot of other revenue, people are really focused on those two bits of revenue. And I think that people are going to push for it. I think that people should advocate for it because this is really an unheard of circumstance. And depending on how long we're paused for, maybe that's what they can send it out. But I think given the status of the money and the budget conversations that are, hopefully going to kick off again, it's going to be something that people are going to feel like they need the revenue for, although the development community will feel like, hey, now we really need a boost again. I think that what I've been saying to people is if you're not involved in these conversations and you've never been to city council and you've never been to these hearings, I'd like you to go because it's great to complain or want to see change. But if you're not there helping to advocate for it, there's a lot more naysayers generally than there are people in support of it. So my hope would be that they extend it so that people who have their projects in the pipeline don't get penalized. And I do think we might need a little bit of a boost. Yeah. But again, I don't know if that's going to happen given the budget.
It's also possible that that it gives them a chance to look at it again, because I know that there was a lot of reasons that went into why they selected it, the change that they made versus the reality of what it's causing and the actual impact it's going to have. So maybe this gives them a time to look at that again. That would be the hope, at least.
Yeah, maybe they revise it instead of a 10, maybe the first 3 years you still get the full, and maybe they drop it off slower on the back end to help compensate. That's an interesting suggestion. Who knows?
Great. Just kind of relating it to the tax abatement, Scott, it might be a loaded question, but right now, when do people have to submit to get the tax abatement? You know, what's going on, you know, for residential new construction? When would you have to submit zoning and building right now, given the current, you know, economic landscape?
It's a great question. You know, if you're going for a variance, it's, I mean, we were even saying before this, you know, if you're going for a variance, you probably, it's almost past, you know, it's just, there's no way. If it's still in December, it's not even worth doing that. Basically, we've been saying that, you know, everything has to be at least submitted, and kind of what our goal is by the end of October, just to make sure we give enough buffer in there for permits to get approved, depending on kind of where things are coming out. You know, and again, it depends on the project size on where that is, but with a lot of these new permitting requirements, they're getting much stricter on prerequisite approvals, and a lot of the prerequisite approvals timelines are getting drug out more and more. PWD especially, their timelines have gotten probably double or triple the length, just based on their workflow and kind of their requirements they're doing. And now on this on top of it, I can only foresee what the volume is going to be like for them when we come out of this. So my best recommendation is as much buffer as possible to make sure that it gets in before that 12/31 deadline.
Awesome. Next question I have, just regarding you know, now the transfer of real estate and what's happening. Adam, this one's for you. What's going on with title? You know, can we, what if there's pending violations on a property? I'm trying to, you know, transact it right now, and I got to deal with, you know, the city. What can you tell me a little bit on that front? Anything you've experienced so far to date?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and this is a question that like has many layers, but because like, for example, right before this call, I just got a message from a friend who works at Keller Williams, and they got a message around like 5 o'clock last night, and I'm sure that anybody in title who's on this chat can speak to it, but they're constantly working because they were told like an arbitrary date of March 6th. Any sales that happen after that really aren't going to be under that essential umbrella or allowed to move forward. So effectively shutting down what the title companies and the agents thought they could do, which was continue these pending transactions. So they've kind of put a cutoff on that. So what we've been doing at our firm is, and this is something we've done a lot even before all this happened, was like, if there's something pending, which right now is a lot, like there may be violations pending, tax abatements obviously pending. We've been doing specialty agreements that essentially allow us to hold within our trust as lawyers an escrow for a client, so that basically they can have a deal move forward and not have to, you know, deal with necessarily if the abatement closes before settlement. So essentially we can move the sale through, and we have an agreement that's basically stipulating how that issue that's still pending is going to work out. And I know Rachel's done some things now because of this situation with violations, which we would typically resolve before closings. And now we're kind of waiting because there's just lag in who we can get a hold of.
Good. Rachel, you have anything to add on that, or, you know?
Yeah, I would just say like we're trying to figure out workarounds to everything we can, and where there may be something that title, it's not really a title issue, like a violation may not, local violations may not be necessarily a title issue. A lot of times with title reports, your local violations don't even show up. You have to go on L&I's website to pull them, or something that they maybe have been able to figure out they can't. So we've drafted, again, these agreements, and we're trying to come up with creative workarounds so that people can move things forward as much as possible.
Great. Kind of a question for all of you, and then I want to get some audience questions because there's a few in the chat, and one on Facebook, a couple on Facebook too. What do you think is the best way we can utilize this time right now between anyone involved in real estate in the city?
I would just say, like, I would take this as an opportunity. I mean, I know for us internally, we're taking it as an opportunity to really look at our processes and our systems to get as efficient and streamlined as possible. I know we're working with you guys on how we better collaborate together with all the projects we all do. And then just with clients, I mean, Scott and I were like on a 2-hour call yesterday with a client who wants to move forward with the variance project, 2 variance projects. And we're actually have more time to have preliminary conversations with both, you know, people involved with the RCO process and council. And we're able to strategize and take a little bit more time to work together than we would have, because, you know, everyone was always trying to rush everything through before. Now we have some lag time. So I would take everything as an opportunity and try and come up with creative workarounds if you can. To certain things, you know, within the confines of ethics and the rules, obviously. But my comment to everyone would be like, take this as an opportunity to get yourself as best prepared. You don't want to be that person who the city opens up, because none of us have like a secret, you know, pigeon that's flying and telling us when it's going to happen, where you're like, oh shoot, now I'll get my stuff together. Like everything should be queued up as best as possible so you can start sprinting, you know, the second, because there is going to be delays and you don't want to be someone who's behind the ball at that point.
Yeah, I think for investors, I mean, like, you know, I get that you can't go inside properties, but a vacant lot's a vacant lot. And this is probably more time than ever. You're not seeing multiple competitive bids coming in. You know, it's a time to really evaluate. You can really sit with your numbers and really make sense of stuff and see it as a whole portfolio. So that kind of alludes to, I think that when it all starts coming together and ramping up, people who take this time to really, you know, get their stuff in line are going to, you know, I think going to really skyrocket.
Scott, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, everyone, at least in architectural engineering, you know, all these professions are still working diligently. And honestly, you know, a lot of the kind of competitiveness and kind of the busyness of where people were before has started to dwindle. So, you know, people are a lot more eager out there, and that goes with selling or subconsultants or anything, in trying to get things together and really try and push development in general. So I think now, again, if you're starting a project, is like such an ideal time to start it, to try and get ahead of things. I mean, no matter what, we typically say, you know, starting a small project, you know, you're at least 2-3 months in design and permitting as is. So, you know, with this shutdown, your timelines don't really change from what that is. You might have a little bit of a lag going forward, but really it's unaffected. And hopefully, you know, if you're just starting a project, the sale price of that project goes down, and, you know, your end profits at the end are going to go up.
Yeah. I'd also say, just, you know, from where I sit, you know, we got worried for a second, and even ourselves, you know, as soon as the shutdown happened, it's like you review your expenses, you review everything going on. You know, we paused our marketing, we paused some consultants, we stopped, and then, you know, the clients did the same thing. There was a week we didn't sign any proposals, and that's rare. Mm-hmm. And we go, oh my God, nothing signed this week. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, well, people are now coming out. They're like, look, I do have to get stuff going. And even us, we resumed the marketing with the company we paused, right? So, you know, I just think it's, you know, it was a shock. It's an unprecedented event. I mean, you know, you look back, you know, the closest thing to this is the 1918 pandemic that lasted 4 years, right? Like that's it. No one has experienced this in their lifetime. So, you know, I just think, you know, it's day by day, but, you know, use this time to be as efficient as possible. Yeah. Tool, you know, rework on processes. We've been telling our internal teams, like, the shit we've been trying to get done, it's like, this is the time to do it.
Right. No excuses.
Takes a minute. No excuses, right?
We, just on a, you know, business note, I think, you know, if you have a business like we do that we expect to be 25 plus years, you know, in business, we're going to come through hurdles, maybe not like this and as drastic, but it sure set us up to know how to be a lean, mean fighting machine, and to know how to tackle this, what you really need in the downturn, what you don't. And I think that's been super helpful. So I think I would urge everybody to look at their business and see how productive it can be at its leanest. And then just on a random note, you know, doing some stress stuff. I bought one of these massage guns. You know, I don't know. I'm just trying to, you know, trying to get myself in a good mind space so I can help my customers, my clients.
Yep. Great. All right. So let's okay.
If I was looking for professional services right now, like, think about how much leverage you have if you're willing to now go out and spend money right now, right? Because everybody wants people now. Before, when we were all like inundated with so much stuff, remember there was times like I would say to Scott, like, hey, got like someone new to send over, and he was like, can't do it, like, can't. But now it's like, you know, so people who are looking for professional services, like, you have a lot more leverage than you had before, and I would use that to your advantage. The same at this point with, getting some steals as far as real estate's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part of, I mean, I just think about this myself, being cooped in my house now for 4 weeks at a time, is you realize, like, do I really like this house? Do I like my space? What else do I need? I think from a residential perspective, I think it's going to put more emphasis actually on a lot of things that we do when we do develop,
Yeah, I've already asked Scott for an extension on my house, so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He did. He was like, what's a roof deck and a third floor cost?
That's great.
Really
All right. So first question, I just want to get into it. Lynn asked, can you provide the mailing address or where to find the mailing address to submit revised drawings for permits that are currently in for permit? Thanks.
Is it MSB? You're talking about MSB?
Yeah.
Yes, I can provide the address and the information for that. I'll post it up in the Facebook group right after this call. But I can share that with you for sure.
Yep. And I'll also just follow up with an email, send it out, and people that were on this call.
Yeah.
We'll post it everywhere on the Facebook. Next question from Abe. I have a follow-up question regarding resolving a lack of use permit causing an inability to get a rental license. Seems like I will need a CO, which I will not be able to get. Rachel, can you specifically tell me who you have been emailing regarding putting these violations on hold?
Sure. So it depends on what the violations are that need to be resolved. And with a CO, with housing rental licenses in general, if it's new construction, you do need, or a new use, you do need both a new use permit and you do need a CO. If it's just a transfer and it's new ownership, for example, one of the ones I'm working on right now, it's a client who purchased it about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Same tenants, it's just no change of use, it's just a change of ownership, but there's a violation on it. So I was able to reach out to someone at City Council and get a hold of someone at LNI, and we're emailing back the documents that are needed. There's something, it's very small documents that he needs. It's nothing, no exterior, big exterior issues or Board of Building Standard violations, kind of things like that. But it depends on what your violation is. And I've been taking them case by case. I'm not going to share who exactly at City Council I'm reaching out to because that's my relationship with them, and they're helping me out on something because they have incredible relationships with LNI. But we're taking it on a case by case basis. I would say, again, if it can't be resolved, if I can try and fix it for you, I will. So email me and I'll let you know. I literally took one. I was on contingency. I'm like, let me just see if I can do it. We were able to do it. I won't do that again. But just shoot me the email and let me know. But it depends what you're trying to do. You can get use permits online still as long as it's allowed as of right. And you don't need a CO unless it's a new use or it's new construction. Otherwise, you can move forward the housing rental license without it.
Great.
And
Go ahead.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Like, do you think that the people at LNI are taking into consideration if there is something like really small, maybe it hasn't been closed yet, like it is correct that there is a violation sitting there, but they understand that there's a need for
if there's something where it was, for example, this one was like a fire alarm certificate where they didn't have the fire alarm certificate on record to close the violation out. Well, the client has it. It just wasn't provided to anyone at LNI. That's an easy document to send over. If it's something where someone has to come out and look at it and it's not an emergency, they're not going to go do that right now. The biggest concern with this one was there's active tenants in there and there's no housing rental license. And in the event that something happens where the owner needs to deal with either an ejectment or an eviction, God forbid, you have to have these documents in order, or the courts, you're gonna have a hard time with the courts. So it just depends on that. But yeah, if it's something where you're missing a certificate, things like we did one where there was a fence that was a lot higher than it should be. We know you can't get a contractor to fix that right now, but that's where we escrowed money and we'll get work to get that resolved after. So like I said, it depends on the violation.
So just a clarifying question on that. The Eclipse, and the information that's on Eclipse, notes that I don't have a use registration permit and therefore can't get a rental license. It is not new construction. It's just a change of ownership, but it does say that I need to get a CO. Is what you're telling me that in reality, I don't need to get a CO?
It's my understanding, and we've done this recently for clients, it's how I learned it, was that if it's just a change of ownership and it's not a change of use, it's just a change of ownership, that you do not need a CO. It's on LNI's website. You do not need a CO to get a housing rental license. The problem I think is maybe the Eclipse system triggers it. So we actually had to go down to L&I. If you're still having that problem, I will try and work that out for you, because if it's just, and I literally used L&I's own website, like, yo, you're the ones who said for this and this. And what we did is we used a HUD settlement sheet, or if you didn't have a recorded deed or whatever, but if you want to email me offline, I'm happy to try and help you. But that is my understanding. And we've recently pulled housing rental licenses without COs, with just the settlement sheet for change of ownership.
Cool.
So,
Abe, I'll connect you and Rachel via email.
yeah.
Yep.
And just know that like the Eclipsism is not perfect. It's like, this is like, it's actually was in existence for a while. They just now did like another level of like updates for it to go live, but it's not perfect. And you shouldn't.
They were expecting to gradually implement it, I think, and this has forced it to be everybody get on there. So we'll find holes like you're finding.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, cool. Next question is from Rodney. Yo, Scott, you mentioned that the information could be submitted through the mail. What if we're submitting new utility plans? I have a triplex where the alteration permit was approved, but the electric plans weren't submitted yet.
So utility plans in general, are you talking more about Philadelphia Water Department utility approvals? I'm assuming. So utility plans that are required for new utilities that are going in can still be submitted digitally. They've been that way for a little bit with Philadelphia Water Department. So new utility lines can still go in. I will say they're coming back super slow. I mean, we've seen at least a month and a half to get those coming in.
He
So
said
you're looking
electric plans, not water department. Interior plans, he said.
So electrical permits, so electrical plans basically, I think are still able to be submitted via Eclipse.
Yeah, you're right.
You're good.
And if you don't have an account with Eclipse, you can either reach out to me or Scott or Brian, because we all have this it already set up. We've had to have it set up before because of like commercial activity license and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
if you can send it through a design professional and legal professionals as well. If you don't have your own.
Great. Just a follow-up from Michael Adler. You should definitely initiate new matters in the courts. E-filing is still open. So, talk to your lawyer, make sure you can e-file, just get it in, any responses, but, do whatever we can do on that realm. Abe, another question just regarding abatement, hearing grumblings regarding L&I issues, provisional building permits that do not have the associated streets right away, PWD approvals, but are effective for abatement submissions. Has anyone heard more on this? BIA doesn't seem to know, seems like a rumor at this point.
I mean, I don't personally know if they're allowing for, so the abatement legislation reads you need a building permit, both at the state level and the city level. You need a building permit. I don't know if it expressly mentions a temporary conditional building permit. I would reach out to Betsy Baldwin or someone like that to ask them, because her and both Dave Perry would be able to give a better answer to that if a temporary building permit. Again, though, like OPA is not open right now, so nobody's submitting abatement applications anyhow. At least I'm not aware that OPA is open. But maybe for when things do open up,
and OPA and BRT and the TRB, they're all dealing with a lot of the stuff coming from the small business funding right now. So I know that's a lot where their head's at. So like tax clearance departments, they're open and they'll respond, but I know they're prioritizing for the purposes of submissions for funds and grants, as that seems to be like the priority right now, to keep these businesses open instead of just moving projects along. That being said, I mean, they are, like, I have been able to get a hold of people at OPA and at the tax clearance and revenue.
Yep. Cool. I'm going to take just a question off of Facebook. This one's from Jamie Quinn. What about finished product or projects where buyers need punch list items done? So what I would say, just, from a construction standpoint, we wouldn't be doing, there's no way you could do punch list at the moment, at least from our standpoint, and the way we're determining it without a waiver or anything, just because they're, in my opinion, they're not life critical. But I would say, anyone that comes back for a warranty request right now through our system, we're letting them know that as soon as construction gets up and running again, that we will be there as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I've seen this a couple times already. And I get like, some of it, there has to be trust, which is kind of a funny word when it comes from a lawyer, because there's not much of it from lawyers. But, I've seen people do agreements for after the fact, figuring after closings. It sounds kind of scary once all the money's been transferred. But, you could create a legal relationship based on that. At the same time, like you're saying, it depends what's on the punch list. And obviously this new stuff that came down about the March 6th and what's considered a pending transaction, what's not. I think that really does, but like, again, safety first, right? So, I mean, I've had people say like, hey, we'd rather have the contractors come in now. It's at the safest. It'll just be them, to be doing that. And at the same time, is it really reasonable to request a contractor come out and work on your house and risk their own safety? So, yeah.
I would say, emergency repairs for sure. If there's something like that, a system or, something with the water, that seems to make sense.
That tile grout's going to get filled at a later point for sure.
There are reasonable people and there are not reasonable people in this world, and that's how we all have jobs. So,
another question. This one's from George. Is L&I doing inspections pre-installation / drywall, whether you have a waiver or not? For example, just got electrical inspection yesterday on 2 units, ready for inspection. Waiver applied for, but no response. My understanding is that at the moment, I'm not aware. At least, currently our organization isn't requesting inspections at the moment. I can tell you, with the waiver, we're going to do a roof just because we need to do it to preserve the building. So if that happens, I'll let you know. Scott, do you have any insight on that?
From my understanding, you can try and request inspections. They all have to go through Eclipse at this point, though.
Yeah.
The only way to actually request a construction inspection, if you are somehow at that point where you need it for whatever reason, it could be worth a try. When this first happened, the first 2 weeks, that's what they were telling us. Obviously construction shut down at this point, so I would say most likely you're probably not going to get it, but you could certainly try. There's skeleton crews out there.
Yep. Another question, just, John Connors on Facebook asks, will the tax abatement deadline be extended? Just to kind of recap, it's a big unknown at the moment. There's people that it's in everyone's mind, because I can tell you just about every real estate project uses it. I'm not aware of any that really don't. But I know, there's lobbying going on. BIA is on top of it. I feel like they're going to be the first to know and kind of distribute that information.
Yeah. We hope that at least from my standpoint, we hope that the city uses everything in its means and the state uses everything in its means to help its local businesses out. And that's an easy one right there.
Yep. Another question off of Facebook from Ron Diabasi. Sorry, late to the party. Have you guys heard that L&I is requiring in-person meetings for make-safe permits?
I've heard that L&I is only going out for things like make-safe permits, and because I think they have to inspect it in person. Obviously, the way that make-safe violations work, you get a violation and make a building safe, and you have usually 30 to 60 days to submit a report by an engineer to L&I showing what changes you're going to make, and then you have to have L&I come out and inspect a couple of times. I think it's at least 2 times through when you're preparing and then when it's finished for them to close it out. So I do believe that they are coming out of very limited cases for make safe, because that's essential. And to your letter earlier, Brian, that's something that affects the safety of humans. So that's always something that they've kind of put at the forefront of almost anything in the inspection world with L&I has been make safes, but I do believe that they have to come out in person. And there's probably been specific protocol lined up as to how to handle that.
Great. Have a question from Taylor. Well, not really a question. He goes, when this virus is over, I'm going to take my horse to the Old Town Road. I'm going to ride till I can't no more.
That's the spirit,
That's the spirit.
That's exactly what we're talking about. Opportunities, take them.
Thank you for that.
Just a little update on the eclipse. Someone asked, is L&I responding to inspection requests? And Lynn just replied that we received an inspection on Monday of this week via Eclipse. So it sounds like there is a skeleton crew still working out there. I would just take everything through Eclipse. Another question just came in. Joe DeQuinto, hi Brian, sorry, jumped on late. Can we use structural engineers for inspections? How about plumbing and HVAC? Is there someone that can inspect and write a report for L&I?
I don't think so.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Anyone maybe in the audience?
The way it works generally is that L&I has to be the ones that okay and close out permits. So I can't imagine you could have someone else do it, but I don't know.
I mean, I think you're probably talking more about like a structural investigation report regarding beam conditions of structure or something of that nature. You know, it's really going to depend on the design professional. I mean, the way that we look at this, at least from our perspective, is that, you know, unless it's 100% essential and adamant, there's a life safety issue. You know, it's probably not essential at that point. So, I mean, most design professionals are kind of, in my opinion, looped into construction really, as far as site surveys and stuff of that nature. So if, you know, it's probably a no, but, you know, if you can find someone, or if it is a life safety issue, then you can probably find an engineer willing to do it.
Yep. Another question for Rachel, specifically from Abe. We bought a building in the middle of this that has a roof that is caving in. Do you think there's any legal downside to calling L&I to issue a violation on the property so that we can subsequently obtain a make safe permit? One could also take the attitude that fixing the roof is permitted under the state's guidelines, but from a Philly perspective, we would probably need a permit.
I don't know. I think if you want to call L&I to have them come out to issue you a violation on your roof that's caving in, you'd want to make sure that you can actually get a waiver from the state to be able to repair it. So I think that the state stuff is what supersedes the local stuff, because originally the mayor was still wanting people to continue with construction, and then the governor was like, no, like that's not happening, and that got shut down. So my thought would be, like, if it's in really, really bad shape, that we could certainly reach out to the L&I commission and say, hey, how should we handle this, to get some guidance before we go call L&I and have someone come out there. I just sometimes worry about we think that it's a good move while we're, in this environment, and then we'll end up causing more problems for ourselves. So I would certainly want to ask Dave Perry how to handle it first. In the event that he's like, no, actually it'll cause more harm, or you actually won't be able to get a waiver from the state, and then you're kind of stuck in the same position. And now you're dealing with L&I with a make safe violation that you don't want to deal with them with. If you can always avoid make safe violations, you want to, because of the timeline and how much pressure there are for those and the cost of dealing with that. But I would ask for some guidance from the city officials first before I would go do something like that. That's how I'd handle it.
Thanks.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions at the moment? And funny one from Adler. With the new Eclipse system, is there a new online way to make bribes and kickbacks to L&I to move projects along? Just kidding. Yeah, well,
that's funny though. If there is, they're going to find it. You know who you are.
There was, if anyone hasn't seen it, there was a great article on, came out in the Inquirer today, kind of talking about the Eclipse system. And, obviously if you're having frustrations with it, you're not the only one. I mean, I can tell you up until beginning of last week, we were still having frustrations with it. So we knew that the city had to go digital. What a better time than to, jump in the deep end and let's everyone swim for a minute to see if we can all get through it.
They call that stress testing.
Yes.
OPA is doing the same thing. I don't know if anybody had issues. We did a bunch of Board of Revision of Taxes hearings for both abatements that were filed late and also for tax appeals and assessments that we got negotiated down for clients. And then we would reach out to the evaluator after, because we try and settle them if we can first. If not, then you take it to the hearing. But OPA is updating finally to the CAMA system, which is a computer-assisted mass appraisal system, which I heard about when I first started in council with Alan Dom, which was in 2015-16. They were like, yeah, next year it's going to be up, but OPA is updating their system also. So if you've had any issues with OPA's system that it's not been updated, they went through a change in January that I still don't think is complete, but they're supposed to be updating all their systems so that they can do a better job of mass appraisals and actually have information from a lot of other sites and databases in order to make better blanket assessments, because I know everyone probably here has experienced really inaccurate assessments or ununiform assessments. So keep that in mind with OPA too, that they just implemented their system. And so there may be some issues to work out with that too at a later date.
Great. Just Yinka, right before the shutdown, I was able to get a 30-year tax abatement through OPA, and the final step is receiving the approval from their system. However, it was approved. But yeah, I also know, submitting, obviously we've submitted abatements for real estate stuff, all the clients. I can tell you, we submitted stuff last year and still haven't received it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
if it's vital, and if it's something vital, like, again, I've been helping people out with tax clearances that are like pending or haven't been updated in the systems for like the purposes of funding to PIDC or something like that. They'll work on that. Like that's where they're at with it basically. But like if it's not imperative or, you can't transfer the deed over, so to start an abatement, it's just not something they're that concerned with right now.
Yeah, I'll bore you with this information. I'm actually talking to a councilman about, I wrote a really long email that I hope they've read, but about the OPA system, because the way we all know abatements work, unlike L&I where there's a tracking system for permits, the abatement does not have a tracking system. So it goes from you submit to L&I, you get a building permit, you then have to submit to OPA, they shoot it to revenue tax clearance. Sometimes they don't even let you know if there's tax clearance issues with it. Then it just can kind of sit there. Sometimes they do. Then it shoots back to OPA. They look at it again and then back to you with a certificate to commence a 10-year tax abatement. Then it goes back in their system and then it has to get updated to reflect it. So, and none of this is tracked, and there's maybe 2 or 3 people at OPA that actually handle any of this. I've talked to some council members about trying to get a system, and also, as everyone knows, there's no fees involved. So one of the reasons they're allowed to do fees for L&I is because they're supposed to use it for administrative costs of administering the permits and the technology that they're using. We've suggested they do the same thing with OPA so that people can better track, their abatements, and it doesn't take, 12 weeks or longer to know if you got an abatement and have it reflected. But again, that's just the way it works right now. So all these are things that we should look at and try to advocate if we're involved with BIA or other groups or have access to other people in government to kind of talk through what are some other solutions that we're seeing that can be implemented, even in the short term or long term, that we're all experiencing now.
Great. Another question from Michael. Curious if anyone knows anyone who has received any emergency grants funding yet from the PIDC, SBA, PPP, et cetera. I know I was on a mastermind call yesterday. One out of the businesses had received already PPP, which was crazy to hear.
Yeah, that is, because I have gotten people that have been approved for it by their banks, but no actual money has hit an account. PIDC, I haven't heard anything regarding money actually getting in people's accounts. EIDL, yeah, definitely. I have seen people who have gotten money for that. But the payroll protection program, no. And I know that a lot of people didn't do the emergency disaster loan, because they knew they were going to do the PPP, and so they've just been waiting. I spoke to a bank today, a smaller bank, mid-size, and they said like they'll be processing and they expect to be sending money out within 2 weeks. So whether or not the banks have gotten it is another story. But I know from the processing standpoint, I would think a mid-sized bank is a good reflection, and 2 weeks maybe.
Yep. All right, great. Any other questions before we cut out here? We're just right at the hour mark. Is anyone from Planning Commission working remotely? Rach, you want to take that?
I know that you can email some of the people from Planning Commission to see that if they're working. Scott and I were talking, there was a code question we had yesterday that I was going to reach out to someone at Planning. I don't know which one of them are working remotely or which aren't. I would say just reach out and see. But I do know that they're trying to figure out how to do CDR online. I know Leo mentioned that on our call, that they're trying to work through figuring out civic design review virtually. But there is, I believe, Scott, right on Eclipse, where if you need a Planning Commission stamp, you just like click it in the Eclipse system. Is that right?
So no, actually.
Okay.
So the Philadelphia Streets Department and Water Commission can be submitted digitally.
Got it.
through that system for prerequisite approvals. Unfortunately, Planning Commission and Historical Commission are quote unquote shut down. So I think, again, people check their emails regardless and probably will respond. But
Probably
if it's
a quick question, but a stamp, I don't think anybody's going to get stamps right now.
yeah, there's no stamps and no reviews basically happening. So anything that's, prerequisite approval with Planning Commission is currently held up as well right now.
Great.
They
All
should
right.
be planning on that.
I don't know. That would make sense.
Phase 2 maybe.
Brick by brick, it'll come hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to say, thank you for everyone that attended this call. The hope is that we're going to do this a little bit more often as we all continue to ride out this pandemic in our homes here. Hopefully you found this information useful. Please reach out. I will also circulate another email with, people's contact information, put it up at least on our Facebook page. In case, you want to reach out to Rachel, Adam, myself, or Scott specifically for another question that comes to your mind over the next week or so here. One thing I've just been telling everyone, stay healthy, stay optimistic, and stay 6 feet apart. So, keep at it, stay positive. Positivity is going to get us all through this. And it is what it is. There's nothing, we can't control the outcome. All we can do is control what we all individually do during this time. So.
Preach.
Well, everyone have a great day, and this recording will be available to if you need to rewatch it.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Guys.
Thanks again.